We've learned in earlier lectures that every agent has a unique ML model associated with it. Dialogflow trains a unique model for every bot. Now, the question is, which you should be able to answer at the end of this video, how can you get your ML algorithm expand the range of values that it accepts for an entity without explicitly configuring new values for an entity? Every piece of information that a user needs to provide in order to have his intent fulfilled is specified in the form of an entity. Let's see the entities our intents require. We'll start off with the book cars entity. There are three pieces of information that the book cars intent needs: the city where you want the car to be booked, the date for which this booking applies, like what day do you want to reserve this car, and finally, the kind of car that you're interested in, whether it's a sedan, an SUV, a sports car, and so on. In the case of the book room's intent, the information that we need from the user is almost the same with just one difference. We still need to know the city where you want the room booking. We also need to know the date for which this booking applies. And we need to know the room type, whether it's a suite, a double room, a single room, and so on. Click on the entities link in the left nav pane and let's start defining our developer defined entities. It's pretty obvious that this page wants you to create a new entity. There are a number of links that you can use to create one. We'll use the one in the middle because that's not going to show up once we have our first entity defined. So click on create the first one and let's get started with our developer entity. This will take you to a screen where you can define your entity. The first thing you have to do is give this entity a name. Since this is for the book cars intent, the only developer defined entity there is the car type. So I'm going to call the entity just cars and we'll set up the values, which are the various types of cars that a user can book. Now, the cool thing here is that the values that can be recognized as a part of the cars entity can be learned by your machine learning model as well. Now, your model will learn new values for the cars entity if you click on this checkbox which says allow automated expansion. This will allow your chatbot agent to recognize those values for car types that haven't been explicitly listed in the entity. So, as an example, let's say the only car types that you list within this entity are sedan, SUV, and say a hatchback. But then, somewhere in the conversation, your machine learning model encounters a sports car is also a type of a car. It will also automatically expand the valid values within this entity to include a sports car as well. We leave this checkbox unchecked because we don't really want our model to expand to understand values that are not explicitly listed, because only those cars that are available at our booking site will be listed within this entity range. We don't want our model to arbitrarily understand new types of cars and add it to this list. So leave this unchecked because our use case demands it. But you might have another use case where you want your ML model to learn new values for a particular entity. In that case, you would check allow automated expansion. Another option that you have while defining your entities is the define synonyms. For every value that an entity can take on, you can have a synonym defined for that value. Let's say that your site also offers the ability to book pickup trucks and you want the term pickup and truck to mean the same thing. You could define them as synonyms. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck the define synonyms checkbox. We'll use it in a later example. So you'll see how it's used in just a bit. So uncheck define synonyms and let's define the range of values that make up our entity. There are several different kinds of cars that I want to make available to my users: sedans, hatchbacks, convertibles, SUVs, luxury cars, compact cars, and even a crossover. The full list is as you see on screen. All of these cars have to be referred by these precise names. I haven't defined any synonyms for any of these entity values, and our model will not recognize any new types of cars because we haven't allowed automated expansion. Go ahead, click on save, and your machine learning model will be updated. This was the only developer defined entity for our book cars intent. City and date, if you remember, are system entities. We don't have to explicitly define values for those. There is a developer defined entity that we have to set up for our book rooms intent as well. And that is the room type, the kind of room that our customer can book. So create a new entity, call it rooms, and let's define values for this. Now, this time we won't explicitly add the entity values one by one. We'll define entity values in a slightly different way. Click on the three vertical dots on the extreme right for more options on how you can define entities. There is an option there which says switch to raw mode, and raw mode is what we're going to use right now. Raw mode allows us to use JSON or CSV in order to specify values for our entity. In this example, we'll choose to specify our entity values in CSV format. Now, the CSV format has a number of specific rules that you need to follow. The rules are displayed for you here on screen, but they are also available as a part of Dialogflow's documentation. Simply look up the entities documentation, and the rules for JSON files as well as CSV files are very clearly laid out there. These rules are actually pretty obvious. Once you see an example CSV file, you'll know how to define other CSV files for entity value specification. Every entry in the CSV file corresponds to one value. You have the reference value and then the synonym. They're separated by commas and so on. If you want to specify your entities along with their synonyms in JSON format, it corresponds to the entity object format, the full details of which are available in the Dialogflow documentation for entities. And here is the CSV definition for the values for the kind of rooms that a customer can reserve. Notice that every entity value is specified in double quotes, such as master suite. There is a comma, and deluxe is the same as master suite. Deluxe is a synonym for master suite. Junior suite is a synonym for mini suite. For those reference values that do not have synonyms, simply repeat the reference value itself. For example, double is repeated twice on the same line, indicating the synonym is double itself. There is no additional synonym. It's pretty clear here that when you define synonyms, not all entity values have synonyms. Go ahead and hit save, and you'll notice that the Dialogflow UI has parsed your CSV correctly and set up the entity values and the corresponding synonyms in a tabular format. We are done with defining our developer entities. If you click on entities on the left navigation pane, you'll see the two that we just set up. The cars entity specifying the types of cars that a customer can reserve, and the rooms entity specifying the type of rooms that are available to our customers. And you now know that if you want the machine learning model associated with your agent to recognize entity values that you haven't explicitly defined, you need to click on the checkbox which says Allow Automated Expansion. Your model will learn new values that can be associated with that entity, such as new car types, new room types, or whatever your use case is.